Hello and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the 1970s. We are still in here talking about our favorite albums and songs of each year. And we have reached a fresh year. We had a couple of weeks of 1972, and we are here with 1973. We're going to keep on rolling through these years that are among the greatest ever. And, you know, it'll be downhill soon, and we'll be waiting for these days, wishing for these days. I mean, God, I'm a mess. Anyway, so 1973. I guess I'll go first and how I feel about the year as a whole. Good, yeah, very good. Um, Maybe the weakest 70s year so far for me, but still, that's like a very high bar. So yeah. I think Vanessa is going first. Is that what we just agreed on? Yeah. How do you feel
Yeah.
about 1973?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird year. Like it's still a great year, obviously. It's the 70s, but like I don't know. It wasn't the same as the last couple years where I had like this embarrassment of riches at the top. Like the stuff at the top pretty well was obvious and then the rest was very good, but I don't know. The decision making process was a little different this time. But I mean that doesn't mean that it was bad. It's just different.
Chris?
Maybe different than I expected to, I think.
I kind of agree. There's a few obvious picks here, um, but beyond that, I don't know. I did struggle a little bit to order stuff, and I did have to omit certainly some songs that I wanted to include. That was difficult, but albums, I revisited some, and there's good stuff. Of course, it's good, but some of stuff that I maybe thought higher of or that other people think highly of, I didn't find the same spark that I did certainly from 72. And yeah, so anyway, I did find a lot of good stuff. I still, I discovered some new great stuff, and re-listening to some classics is never a bad time. So I don't really have any bad words. It's only because of where it sits in time that um it's not like it's 1968 or anything. It's definitely still very good. Uh
I
I'm
was
just
going to say this is probably.
you're like, if 68 is gonna come up, I'm out of here. Okay.
It's,
But it is very good. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
73.
it's
Right,
probably
not the yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
it's the weakest year for me since probably 67. But again, we're talking about like all-timer years. So I just think for me, after my top six, it does thin out in terms of albums. But Chris is right. Songs was just as brutal as it's ever been. There are so many tough cuts. So yeah,
Yeah.
Vanessa's going to kick us off, then me, then Chris. So I'm excited because I'm not
Right.
that. I'm not. I don't know. I don't feel as sure about.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, some things changed than what I expected. So anyway, right from number 10, we're going with Waylon Jennings and Honky Tonk Heroes. A little down from where I expected, but still great. Number 9, David Bowie and Aladdin Sane. Number 8, another slight dip, GP by Graham Parsons. Expected that one to be a little higher. Number 7 is Elton John in Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And number 6 was the hot shot of the year that really like went up in my estimation, and that is Paul McCartney and Wings in Band on the Run, which fell in
Nice.
love with. Not quite top 5 though. Number 5 is another album that has gone up for me a bit. A Wizard, a True Star by Rod Tundgren, or Todd Rundgren, as he's most commonly known. Before I heard this album for the first time, I only knew a few songs from Todd, like Hello, It's Me, and I knew about his reputation as a great producer and all that stuff. But I remember this album absolutely blowing me away the first time I heard it. I thought the first side especially was super cool with all those short songs, and they're all these self-contained and sometimes beautiful songs, but also at times totally crazy and off the wall. And even now that I've heard this album many times since the first listen, I still get wrapped up in the journey of that side. And then there's side two, which not only has two of his most classic songs, but also a medley of some soul covers and some more underrated gems like I Don't Want to Tie You Down. So like you really can't go wrong with this album. It's chock full. So that is number 5. Number 4 is Inner Visions by Stevie Wonder. At the risk of repeating myself over and over again the next few years, this truly was Stevie's classic era, and this album keeps it going. Not only is the music and the vocals impeccable here, but he delves into some heavy subject matter like systemic racism and President Nixon. He was going so many places musically and thematically that his peers weren't, especially on Living in the City, which is still an absolutely devastating listen. And I think that opened doors for other artists to speak more freely and be more, it's not that they weren't talking about these things, but I think be more explicit in how they were talking about things. I think it kind of opened doors for that. But that's not all that makes this album great. There's also some beautiful love songs here, like All in Love is Fair and Golden Lady. And it all comes together to make yet another classic album from Stevie in the 70s. Number 3 is Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin. Seems like this is often a Zeppelin album that either gets overlooked or gets a bit of flack from people, but I don't think that's fair at all. Is one that I always played a lot back when I was first getting into the band as a younger person. And I was also fairly unaware of what other people thought of it. So I didn't know any better. I just loved it. And when I revisited for this list, it was one of those catching up with an old friend moments. Like there's always some comfortable familiarity when I listened to it, but also there were things about it that I appreciated maybe more than before. The beauty of the Rain song, how killer of an album opener the song remains the same as, the glorious eeriness of No Quarter, and even songs like that people dismiss, like The Crunge, have their charms. You gotta love that they went there. And I think they were trying a lot of different things here, and in the end, it's an eclectic and engaging album that should not be dismissed and overlooked. But not as great as the top 2, which number 2 is Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath by Black Sabbath, of course. Right from the opening notes of Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, this is a gripping and addictive album. It's an album that hooks you in and never lets go. Whenever I return to it, I inevitably end up playing it over and over and over again because it's just that good. One thing I appreciate about Black Sabbath in this era is that so many of their albums have a different vibe to them while also having a cohesive sound. You know it's them, but they always keep things fresh and interesting with each album. So not only did they create the blueprint for heavy metal with these albums, but they created exciting albums in the process, which only get better the more you hear. And of course, number 1 is The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, because what else would it be? What do you say about one of the biggest and most popular albums of all time? Seems like it's a question we ask a lot with our number 1s on the show, but all I know is that I've heard this album countless times, and every time it's still great and enjoyable. Every time 42 minutes flies by before I even realize it's happening. And overall, it is a cohesive album where most of the songs flow so well into each other that you don't always remember which song you're on, with some obvious exceptions, of course. And like a lot of classic albums, it's easy to take for granted, but it's always clear when I listen to it why I never should. So that is number 1.
Very nice.
Well said. Yeah.
So interestingly enough, Vanessa and I have 3 exact placements in the top 10. So 2 in honorable mentions and 1 on our actual list. So that's strange because Vanessa and I don't seem to line up very often on this. But
Yeah, that's true.
but
I have 2 masterminds with her, so
wow, it's just the year of
don't
us
screw
getting-
this up, Tom. Don't.
Yeah, okay. So number 10 for me, similarly to Vanessa, I had a lot of movement in my list, which I was not expecting. I thought this was pretty cut and dry. And the biggest mover in my top 10, unfortunately, was Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath by Black Sabbath, which I thought would have a shot at my top 5. I downgraded the rating on re-listen. There are some tracks on here that just don't really do it for me. Who Are You in particular? And there's a couple others that I find a bit forgettable, but the best stuff is peak Black Sabbath for sure. My number 9 is one of the three, Aladdin Sane by David Bowie. It's not Ziggy, but I mean, come on, nothing was gonna be. So number 8 might be a surprise. Actually, definitely will be a surprise unless you've spoken to me about this artist. Is Elton John with "Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player," which, God, so underrated. I mean, it helps that Daniel is one of my favorite Elton John songs, so the album opening on that is an instant win for me. And Blues for Baby and Me and High Flying Bird, just so many great tracks that nobody ever talks about. So it's my number 8. Number 7 is Elton John with "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road." So I'm not that crazy. Obviously, "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road" is better. I did a whole hour-long discussion of it with Alex, and I don't think he's one of my favorite albums artists, but I think all of his albums have really high highs in terms of the best songs, which basically got both of these albums up into the top 10 just out of the strength of how good the best songs are. And then my number 6 is "Closing Time" by Tom Waits, which is an album I've known forever, it feels like, but does not make the top 5. So I think Elton was an exact match, right? "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road." We both had at number 7. And the final one is "A Wizard of True Star" by Todd Rundgren, which, similarly to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, I thought was going to be higher on my list, but not that I didn't enjoy it as much as that I enjoyed other albums more than I expected, so it just kind of slipped down. It is my favorite Todd Rundgren album comfortably. Not only do you get a really cohesive album, which really does feel like an unhinged trip in more than one way, like a literal trip to outer space, but also, a trip. There's a real human element to a lot of this as well, which really adds a whole other layer to it. You get the goofy fun of something like "Tick Tick Tick," and you get something heartbreaking like "I Don't Want to Tie You Down," which, oh my God, it's just, oh my, it breaks me every time. And then you get "Just One Victory," which every time I hear it, I feel like I hear it in a, I take the message in a different way. Is it desperate and like a last chance before, I don't know, someone decides to do something rash? Or is it this defiant sort of, I'm almost there to feeling okay, I just need one more victory? And it's like, I can never really decide if it's dark or upbeat. But the song is really catchy, so it's a great way to end the album. It's stacked with awesome songs. Vanessa covered it really well. It is absolutely singular. Even if you don't like the album, there is nothing else like it. My number 4 is "Selling England by the Pound" by Genesis, which I think I'm the biggest fan of Genesis, at least this era of Genesis, of the three of us. Another prog adjacent album that came out this year has been called the best produced, mixed, engineered album ever, which I'm not saying that that's wrong, but this album is up there for me too. It sounds incredible. Everything is so crystal clear in the mix. Every part is so purposeful. And I think it also helps that this is some of the most inspired material that they ever put together. You got the cinema show, which is this just amazing painted picture. Firth of Fifth, which is one of the great prog epics. And then you get more poppy songs like "I Know What I Like." These are some of the most beloved songs for good reason. And then you get little gems like the Phil Collins sung "More Fool Me" chucked in for good measure. So it's definitely still my favorite Genesis album. That could change. I'll be revisiting more of them throughout the years, but I'm pretty certain there's a big gap between 1 and 2 for them. And it's one of my favorite prog albums. So it is my favorite of that lineup for sure. And then number 3. It is "The Dark Side of the Moon" by Pink Floyd, which I've spoken to Vanessa about this before, in the sense that I have an interesting past with this album, and Pink Floyd in general, where they were among the first classic rock bands I fell in love with, maybe the first. And for a while, this one was not my favorite when I was a teenager. I gravitated more towards "Wish You Were Here" and "The Wall." I then sort of grew to appreciate this as my Pink Floyd fandom grew. And then, just as my fandom of this album was reaching its peak, I kind of fell out of love with them as a whole. And then, sort of like all their albums slid a little bit for me, just because it was not the kind of music that I was into. And recently, I've come around a bit, and then listening for this project, it all just came back to me why this is a great album, why everybody loves it so much, why I loved it so much. Because you can pick out any of these songs, and I know like songs like Money have their detractors, and like the instrumentals probably people could take or leave, but you can't take anything out of this album and it still work as well as it does. And most of the songs do work really well listening to them stand alone as well. I think Time is excellent. Us and Them is a song that I think I've underrated my entire life. I've just fell in love with that song. Money I've always loved. I think it's just awesome. The time signature is great, and then you end on Brain Damage and Eclipse, which is like one of the most epic endings to an album you could ever have. So it's hard for me because this is where rating music gets difficult, right? Because I can't really give it a flaw other than it's not really my style of music at this point in my life. That's the only thing I can give against it, really. So it is my number 3, and I completely understand it being number 1, just not for me. And my number 2 is Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin. I mean, I remember when I assembled this wonderful trio of people for this series, and one of the first things I thought was, well, at least we're all going to give spoilers for Chris's list, I guess, but at least we're all going to give Houses of the Holy its due, because I knew you both loved this album, and it does get flack, and I don't understand why. It is my favorite Led Zeppelin album. I was never ready to commit between this and Led Zeppelin 4, but now I am. It's my favorite. It kind of sucks that they both ended up second in their years, but what are you going to do? It's similar story to Dark Side, where I've known this album forever, but this is one where the magic has never waned or faded. All 4 members are really at their peak here. I know some people find Robert Plant's vocals on here annoying, especially on like Jamaica and The Crunge, but I just love it. He sounds great on the whole album. And then especially like Over the Hills and Far Away and the Rain song, some of his best vocal performances, like just incredible. Of course, this is known as the album where John Paul Jones really comes into his own with painting these incredible soundscapes on the keys. Jimmy Page is some of his finest guitar parts, and John Bonham is John Bonham. So that's enough said about that. The Crunge and Dancing Days, I don't think are as excellent as the rest of the album. I still like them, but the other 6 songs are just perfect. Like, it is just, and every time I listen to it, it sends me to a time and place. It's not exactly cohesive, but the whole album has a vibe that I can't really put into words, that is like this sort of, yeah, again, this sort of weird, sort of hippie, otherworldly, like, I don't know. There's like a free spiritedness to it. It's an irresistible album, and it almost defies description, even though I've given it my best shot. And of course, my winner is Quadrophenia by The Who, which is, I mean, I've known those 2 albums for like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years. Quadrophenia I've known for about 8 months. And I've probably listened to it as much as those albums, and it's a double album. Pete Townsend writing on this album is just incredible. Like, you have the lyrical themes throughout. I've recently got it on vinyl, which is now one of my prized possessions. And I was reading along with the lyrics as I was going, and it's just so dense, and there are so many repeated musical and lyrical motifs that are just, it's so impressive. The album's best aspect, I think, is its scope and cinematic feel, with a much improved production over their last rock opera, Tommy. The production is so much more full and grandiose. The sequencing is inch perfect, and everything comes together to create this truly one-of-a-kind experience. But the album also happens to boast brilliant individual songs that you can go back to individually. It's not like, well, it's greater than the sum of its parts. It's more that the sum of its parts are amazing, but it's still greater than the sum of its parts. You get the obvious picks like The Real Me and Love Rain on Me, which are both perfect songs. But then there are so many like songs that just grow on you every time you listen to the album. The Dirty Jobs, I'm One, Cut My Hair, Is in My Head, I've Had Enough, 515, Dr. Jimmy. To me, these are all top tier Who songs, and they're all super catchy and memorable, as well as fitting in perfectly to their points within the album. I think it might be the greatest concept album ever made. I'm in awe every time I listen to it. It's so epic. It's so perfectly constructed. Sounds great. Songs are great. Barely a dip in the entire album. So Quadrophenia is my winner. Love it. Was never really close.
I can't believe I forgot about that when we were predicting. Like
Yeah.
I forgot it existed.
Yeah.
Fail.
Well, we share something or other, Tom. We'll see. I match with one of your winners. Probably. Guess who? Okay. Well, on to honorable mentions. We'll go through these pretty quick. I got a couple that nobody mentioned. Maybe for good reason. No, you know what? I love these. I don't care. My number 10 is Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye. Yeah, I know. I know it's not his best record. I don't care. It's great. I love it. Number 9, Headhunters by Herbie Hancock. Oh, it's a fun one. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, not my usual haunt per se, Herbie Hancock, but that record just goes off. The grooves refuse to quit. Number 8, I'm going Tanks by T-Rex. And a lot of people do not like this record, and I do not understand why. It is definitely not as good as The Slider, or maybe even Electric Warrior, but I think this is like totally a justifiable release for them. A lot of great tracks, and Rolling Stone writer from May 24th, 1973 can suck it. Number 7, I'm going with Aladdin Sane by David Bowie. Yeah. Yeah. And, again, said a lot about Bowie, but this one, not my top. I mean, it might be like, I don't want to speculate where it would land on a total discography for him, but I mean, it might not even be top 5, but it's still very good. A lot of cool tracks on here. It was a fun kind of re-listen. It had been a while for me. And my last honorable mention, number 6, just missing, is Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Oh, sorry we can't make it. So goodbye, Elton. See you later. Obviously I love that record, and there's a lot of just incredible tracks. Okay. Number 5, the real list. Number 5 is Sabbath Bloody Sabbath by Black Sabbath. So we had the pleasure or torture, as it were, of having to rank these songs, eliminate them song by song recently, and it really did make me appreciate how great like all of this is. I mean, I even felt bad about eliminating Fluff and Who Are You, frankly. So yeah, it's just more classic metal, and the songs just sound so good still. I mean, this is 50 years ago. It's just hard to believe that they were setting the tone for like all metal to follow. It's just they continue to be setting the stage. So great record, just a lot of fun. Number 4 will be Innervisions. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's really good. It's probably my number 2, Stevie Wonder, which is pretty good, I think, for him. Yeah, it's really good. It's incredible. Just well deserved. Yeah, obviously this is like into his classic period now. He's well into it. The songwriting is just like peak. The music, the instrumentation is just like eternal. It does. This will never sound aged to me, and I love it. basically every track here is just a winner. And thanks, Stevie. Thanks for making the best music of all time. Appreciate it. Okay, top three. Top three. These are all beloveds. Number three, yeah, no one's mentioned this, so look, I know, but I had to put it here. Um, I'm going with Stranded by Roxy Music. I know. But it's peak Roxy Music to me. This is my favorite record of theirs. And what's crazy is this is the first record they made after Brian Eno left. They kicked him out, or maybe he kicked himself out. Maybe it was friendly. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I haven't seen the documentary that hasn't been made. But even Brian Eno, they kicked him out or he left. I don't know what happened. You can make up your own story. Even he was like, yeah, fair enough. That was the right call. You're better off without me. This is his like favorite Roxy Music record, and he's not even on it. So respect to Brian Eno for, leaving and then them taking kind of the creative je ne sais quoi that he gave them and elevating it into I mean, it's just my favorite. I don't know how else to explain it. I think Brian Ferry sounds great. The instrumentation is tight, but they have these cool kind of expanded songs, and they really kind of go there. It's just a lot of fun. So that's my bronze medal. That's Roxy Music. What can you say? But it's not gonna be as good as my number two, which is Houses of the Holy, of course. This is my favorite Led Zeppelin record as well. Um, I I love every song. I love every song. I mean it. Don't even come to me saying, "What about the crunge?" I don't want to hear it, all right? Don't even talk to me about it. Thank you in advance. Because guess what? I love it too. All right. But the song remains the same, just storms onto this record, and it's so great. It's I don't know how else to say it. You said it was just like a vibe, and it really is. It's just the album cover. That's the vibe. It's just kind of orange, and you're just gonna be orange for a little bit. And but it just, the song remains the same. It has this great vigor and obviously great riff. The drums just sound so sick. That goes into the Rain song, and then that goes into Over the Hills. I mean, there are very few records with this strong of an opening three for me. Seriously, one of my all-time favorites. Just holy cow. And that's almost half the record. Don't talk to me about the crunge. I already said that. So, but the back, I don't think lets up like at all. I think Jamaica and No Quarter, both of those are like all timers for me. You can say what you want about Dancing Days. I don't really care. But The Ocean is a phenomenal closer. My computer's trying to update right now. I'm going to say remind me tomorrow. What's not to love here? I know people put it down, and if it's not your favorite, I understand, because there's a lot of greatness in their catalog. I totally get that, and I'm not here to say it should be your favorite, but if you don't have a real answer for what you don't love here, and it's just the crunge is weird, and that's bad, that's lame, that's lazy. Get real. It's Houses of the Holy. All right, that's enough on that. I mean, it's really not. Go listen to it if you haven't in a while. It's so good. It holds up so well. Okay. My favorite record of 1973 is Dark Side of the Moon. Because of course it is. It's the best record of 1973. Sorry, Tom. Yeah. I've known this for a long time. I think I discovered Dark Side of the Moon when I was like 12. I listened to it and The Wall. My friend like burned me a CD way back in the day, and I've just loved it ever since. Especially like Time, Money, Us and Them, Brain Damage Eclipse, like those I remember having loved, like basically since I have full memories of being alive. Since I remember being in school, and that I've always really loved this record. And now, just sitting down and listening to it in its entirety, I feel a little cheated just listening to a song or two. Really, it's not too long to just find an excuse to just sit down and listen to. And Yeah, I used to just put it on. Like people would come over, I just put it on and not tell anybody. And then it would get to the end and I'm like, we just listened to all the Dark Side of the Moon. You didn't even know it. That's how smooth it was. And they'd say, why are you telling me this? Why do you do this when we come over here? They'd leave. But anyway, despite all that, this album has been with me for a long time. It will continue to be with me for a long time. The songs are just, it just flows incredibly. Everything's been said about it. It's mostly true, and it's my favorite record for sure of 1973. So, yeah, there you go.
Well, it's not mine, so
Oh well, the Who.
yeah, there we have it. I mean, regarding Roxy music, Stranded is one of my favorites, and it was not that far off making honorables. So nice pick. I got to say nice things about Roxy music. Occasionally, I'm contractually obliged. Yeah.
All right.
But thank you very much for joining us for our favorite albums of 1973. We would love to see your lists down below. I'm sure most of you prefer Dark Side of the Moon over Quadrophenia, so I won't even ask that question. And of course, come back next week for our favorite songs of 1973. Not you two, you've got to come back in like 5 minutes.
Coming back right now.
Yeah. But thank you very much for watching, and hopefully we will catch you soon.